What happened is that the International Court of Justice issued an unanimous advisory opinion stating that every country has a binding legal obligation to prevent significant harm to the climate system, whether or not they've signed specific climate treaties. I think it's something, climate anomalies are something that we've been warned about for so long, and they look very different depending on the context, right? Like a really different kind of natural disaster that a region used to not experience, they're experiencing it now. That's a bit more, I guess, tangible.
Phenomenon that happens in the Gulf of Panama, which basically involves wind. I believe it's wind pushing hot water down, and by turn cold water up, right? And it's really important for the ecology of the Gulf.
Welcome to Tangelic Talks, a podcast at the intersection of energy, equity, and empowerment with your co-hosts Victoria Cornelio and Tamez. In this episode of What is Happening Right Now, we've got some news for you that we just think you should know what's happening, especially in the climate space that tends to be undercovered in the news. So this is a quick bite-sized video. On the blog, you'll find all our resources and references to where we're getting the news from and some commentary on what we think about it. So make sure to check that out at tangeliclife.org. Andres, kick us off. What is happening right now?
So there's a lot of news, and it was hard to choose something because there's a lot going on. But I thought I'd go with something that just caught my eye, and I was like, that's really interesting. So there is a phenomenon that happens in the Gulf of Panama, which basically involves wind. I believe it's wind pushing hot water down, and by turn cold water up, right? And it's really important for the ecology of the Gulf. And that has been a pattern for 40 years, and it stopped this year for now. So that means that the areas around there have to get ready and not basically seeing if this resumes next year, if this resumes in some way, and all that will depend on how we're going to have to treat the fishes of that place. The coral reefs will be affected. It will harshly affect the fishing industry. Which is the big thing that I was thinking about, because fishing is such a huge part of the economy in a lot of places, and I imagine in the Gulf of Panama it's very similar, right? And so this will affect spawning rates, because what the main thing it affects is what are they called? The blooms of plankton, phytoplankton.
Oh, right.
And so without those blooms, you don't have the food necessary for huge blooms in other fish species that eat the plankton,
of course,
or the ones that eat the plankton. And so we, depending on how long this phenomenon continues, and it could cause a crash in the species populations and the species that people depend on to make money and eat and all of that stuff.
Gosh.
So
and is this the first time it's happened?
This is the first time it's happened. So the pattern's been going on for 40 years. I'm not exactly sure if before those 40 years it was different, or it just started being recorded around 40 years ago. But this has been a pattern year to year. And now it is the first year for that to cease. So I believe it's a 20 degree differential in surface water temperatures. And
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Fahrenheit. But I believe Fahrenheit and Celsius are the same per degree. It's the same. Right.
Yeah.
So
that's bad.
Yeah, it's really, really bad. Now that's 20 degrees at the most, right? At the most extreme, but it's usually more than 10, and so that is a huge temperature differential, especially for the oceans and species that live in water super sensitive to temperature.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's something that caught my eye, and I was like, well.
Do they have any theories of why this happened?
So not a theory like, you know, it was more or less like, well, this is happening. We'll see what happens next year.
Right. Okay. So they just observed it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because 20 Fahrenheit is like, I think 0.6 or something like that Celsius, which is quite a lot. Yeah. It's almost a whole Celsius change.
Yeah. Like it's pretty big. It's pretty big, and
wow.
Just a couple of degrees Celsius can affect species that live in water. So this is
well, if we turn it into the human side, it's the same thing. Like we've been avoided 1.5.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's a lot. And is it affecting the whole region then? So all the countries that are close to the Panama Canal.
Yeah, this will affect this because fish really spawn in like a very small section. Coral reefs exist in a very small section of the ocean, right? Most of it is just empty with plankton rolling along, or different types of like what are they called? Like not the jellyfish, but the other ones. I forget their name, but whatever. This could affect the entire region. But it's all depending. Like from what a lot of what I see, they're like, we could say what's going on. We're not 100% sure, right? Because you could say it's definitely global warming probably has something to do with it, right? Climate change has something to do with it. The winds have a big thing to do with it. I was reading the article and it talked about how the wind is resting a lot more. Right, the northern winds that they get is like it's ceasing a lot more, and so that's affecting it. And there was another thing about the wind that was affecting it as well, another statistic about it, but I don't remember what it was. And so all of this leads to the same conclusion, like different temperature, different degree of nutrients in the water for the species to eat. Different spawning for plankton, and then so on, a chain reaction, right? The butterfly effect or whatever.
Gosh.
Yeah, so that's
really intense.
Great news.
I can imagine it's also going to affect migration, like migration of the species there, which might be a bigger issue. Like, will they try again next year, or are they just gonna change routes? Not sure how animals work in that sense, but
right, if there's nothing to eat in this whole trajectory of the migration, will they avoid that route?
Exactly. I don't know how quick adaptation is.
Right. I don't know either. They're saying that they might have to just switch the types of fish that are fished and stuff like that. So like, people are on the lookout. It's something to be aware of, I guess, and see if the pattern.
It's a weird phenomenon. Mm-hmm. Yeah, hopefully it's like a one-off thing that just happened this year, which has been a really out-of-pocket year.
Yeah,
for lack of a better word.
It's been a strange year.
Yeah, that's so weird. Well, if you are a marine biologist or someone that understands these kinds of things, please reach out to us. We'd love to get more into what this means and also what it means. You said that the winds are more stagnant, right? Yeah. What does this mean for renewable energy in the form of wind farms and things like that? So if you know any of these topics, reach out to us at podcast@tangeliclife.org, and we'd love to have you on.
Yes, because this is like a thing called upwelling, or like the cold water moves upwards and stuff like that. Like this is something completely beyond my expertise that caught my eye, and that's the whole point of this segment, right? Like, talk about it, and then hopefully we'll get someone on that actually knows what they're talking about.
Exactly, yeah. But it is important to know what's happening, because it is, I think, it's something, climate anomalies are something that we've been warned about for so long, and they look very different depending on the context, right? Like a really different kind of natural disaster that a region used to not experience, they're experiencing it now. That's a bit more, I guess, tangible. It's more visual. But these kinds of things are things that happen kind of in their own silo. So they're really hard to pinpoint.
One of the things that I think like this was hard to pinpoint is like people are like, this is one of the most stable things that has been happening year to year when it comes to just like these movements of water and the movements of air. And so right now people are sort of like, well, who knows? Who knows now? Will it happen next year? Hopefully.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a weird one. Yeah. I think these are the kinds of natural incidents that we keep hearing are going to happen, but right under our noses.
Yes, absolutely.
That's pretty scary. Well, it's a good news that nations can now sue each other for climate damages. That's what I'm bringing to the table
yes.
today. So basically, what happened is that the International Court of Justice issued an unanimous advisory opinion stating that every country has a binding legal obligation to prevent significant harm to the climate system, whether or not they've signed specific climate treaties. So Kyoto out of the water, Paris out of the water. It doesn't matter if you've signed it or not. If you're failing to act on greenhouse gas emissions, it might be considered institutionally a wrong act, and you might get prosecuted by the ICJ.
Wow.
As a nation.
So what is the damages would be? I imagine it'd be like some sort of economical compensation that would go directly towards alleviating this. I would think.
Well, so they haven't said how they're actually going to handle it because it's an opinion. Mm-hmm. So the ICJ, unless you bring a case to them, they can't really act on it. So it's not legally binding, but it carries substantial political and moral force, potentially laying the groundwork for future interstate climate litigation. Because you can pinpoint, for example, if you have a country or various countries in a region that share a river, and you can track the pollution of that river to one specific country, then you can bring in a lawsuit against that country because they're harming this river that you all use.
That's interesting because I've seen like the graph of like contamination from China and Russia and how an airstream carries it basically from there to the United States, right? And so might that be something that we don't know? It's gonna be really interesting to see how this is used. Going into the future.
No, we have to keep an eye on it. And something I'm really interested in is that the responsibility is also going to include the actions of private companies operating within the nation's jurisdiction.
Good.
So that might put some companies hopefully improving their ESGs and CSR work.
Yeah.
Because we could get prosecuted.
Get them in hot water a little bit. See how that
I know. Goes. Yeah. And there's something in climate discourse in general that's called the common but differentiated responsibility. This came in during the Kyoto Protocols. And it's basically like we all have a common responsibility to do better for the climate, but differentiated responsibility, right? Some countries have more responsibility than others. The way to know that is semantics, really. Yeah. Like if you are a country that has polluted for years, do you have more responsibility because you kickstarted this? Or are you a country that pollutes a lot now, so you have more responsibility? It's hard to pinpoint what that is. I think these kinds of legislations at an international level help us figure that out, right? Yeah. So if you can take a nation to court, now you have to actually create a case of why they are responsible for the thing you're taking them to, right? Mm-hmm. Which is something we haven't been able to do before. I'm just a bit worried what it's going to look like.
Name the thing that is happening and why it's bad.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. It's very interesting. And I think because the ICJ deals with a lot of human rights issues. So I'm particularly excited because I'm a social person. So if we can track climate change issues, pollution issues to harm on individuals and communities, then we can take it to the ICJ because there's a violation of human rights happening because, say, the quality of air is so bad that people are dying from lung diseases and respiratory health complications and these kinds of things. That's an actual case that you can bring up now.
Yes. Yeah. Mm.
You know?
Okay.
So that's really exciting.
And so it's so these would be international, or could it be like within, like if there's a certain group affected inside of a nation? I imagine there's other mechanisms for that, right?
Right. So that's the thing. So the ICJ is international, but I think opening it up to the fact that nations could sue each other means that locals can sue their own nation.
Right. Okay.
Right? Because that's like a class action almost. Yes. And also, I would imagine it extends to private companies in that sense. So countries now are not only responsible for their own emissions, but also regulating corporate emissions, which creates a new avenue for targeting producers indirectly. Because if you are going to operate within a certain jurisdiction, you're going to have to follow this because now there's the liability that you might be taken to the ICJ.
Right, right. Okay.
Which is quite
That's
interesting. We've
interesting.
never seen anything
I
like
hope it's
this.
used as a tool for good, right? Because like you're saying, like if it's used by, especially if it's used by people who are being affected, then it's
Mm-hmm.
great that you can have the backing of something that is big and
Mm-hmm.
legitimate, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you see a lot in academic literature talks about ecocide. And it's really hard to pinpoint what counts as ecocide. So it's basically genocide, but for the environment, ecological genocide. And it's hard to pinpoint who's responsible for that, right? Because you have communities that still cut down trees because they need it for wood fire and for powering up different things in their communities,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But they have completely deforested
Mm.
a whole area. So is that ecocide? It's a hard one,
Yeah. 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 I mean,
right?
you
Because it's
could
a
say it's
national thing that
ecocide, but
we
out
need
of
to do.
necessity. You could say that, like it's
Right, exactly. And I think that's where people get where it gets a bit sticky when we talk about actual legal litigation around climate change, because some of the climate harms we are doing are out of necessity. Some of them are unbeknownst to us. So some new research might come out that this thing we did 5 years ago is actually really bad. So then can you get persecuted in hindsight?
mm.
Right? And how do you know that the people that did it didn't know that this was a possibility?
Ah,
Right? Because a lot of projects are, oh, there's a percentage that this could happen, but we've done all the things for it not to happen, and then it happens. And it's like, well, but we didn't mean for it to happen. Does that count in climate litigation? The fact that you didn't intend for something to go wrong?
yeah,
So
yeah,
there's a lot of conversations around, the semantics around it and everything. But I think it's a big step because as climate change keeps moving down in the priorities of the national agenda, I think bringing it into an international framework that can actually get prosecuted, could be a way forward for international cooperation, which we are severely lacking
yeah.
in the climate space.
That is true, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not a huge like fan of like international institutions, but like something for the legal framework and something that is there to basically to to help the people at the lowest right at the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
I think that's never a bad thing, really.
Yeah.
And I I want to see how this is going to be used. Like I want to see what's going to be the first thing that happens with this.
Me too. I want to see how it pans out
Yeah.
because there's also, because it's an advisory guidance, and it's not enforceable necessarily.
Mhm.
What I presume will happen is that it's likely going to inform national and regional climate litigation.
Uh,
So bringing it back down to, can a region sue their country because of X, Y, and Z? But it also makes climate science legally actionable because a lot of times climate science is just stats that we see in our reports. So if scientists said that this was going to happen and it's happened, we might be able to prosecute a couple people.
yeah, yeah,
If we had to stay under 1.5 and we can track it back to this nation or this company were part of the reason we couldn't get there, they might be in a bit of hot water.
if we could actually trace it back to them, which is the hard
Exactly.
part.
And I think that's where it gets muddy.
Mhm.
But hopefully we'll figure out how it's going to look. I will follow this very closely
Yes,
because I'm really interested in how it's going to work.
yeah. Send me updates. I want to know about this.
I will do. Yeah. And there's also the other thing that it's talked about in COP at the Conference of the Parties. It's talked about in terms of the Adaptation Fund, that countries that are already facing loss and damage, like low-lying islands, the Maldives, are a good example of that, Kiribati, Tuvalu, they may now have
Ah,
some legal way to demand compensation and adaptation support.
right, right.
Because if you are an island nation that is suffering from high levels of sea rise and you're losing territory, and you can trace that back to X, Y, or Z, then that might be a new way to demand compensation and adaptation.
Right.
Especially since we've been so slow at operationalizing the funds that we have for climate adaptation at an international scale.
Absolutely, and the idea that it could be the compensation could be, hey, you're going to help us with the infrastructure to adapt instead of like maybe necessarily some monetary thing is actually
exactly.
The more action and less money there is the direct money, right? It makes it slightly less corrupt, right? Makes everything slightly less corrupt.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
so that's pretty cool. I think that if this can be used to help the adaptation towards these things that are happening, then but this example that you've gave is gonna be a hard one, because who are you gonna direct that who are you gonna levy the blame towards for that one
that's her
specifically?
next. Ooh. I think that's her next thing to figure out.
Yeah.
Now the ICJ has said there's a framework, so how do we use it? Who do we use it for? And also, again, this is something I've said a couple times on this podcast. Humans are so good at coming up with good tools, and it's just about how we use them. Yeah. This sounds like a great idea. We've had a lot of great ideas that have turned out to be quite murky. So I want to hold out hope that this is a good idea that you can't really weaponize.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Because there is so much that goes behind being able to bring a case to the ICJ.
Right.
That I want to think it's a harder process to corrupt, at least. I think the last thing that was brought to the ICJ in recent months was from South Africa about what's happening in Israel and Palestine.
Oh, okay.
Because human rights violations and everything with what's happening with the conflict.
Yes.
You can't just think of it and just go, and knock at their doors. There's a law that goes into it. And most times it's not just one country doing it. So I want to think if countries agree on something, so in the United Nations, the Security Council is probably the only organism that can do things that are legally binding, and the ICJ. So I want to hold out hope, guys. I want to be a little hopeful.
So this is basically extending one of the two tools that actually seems to be effective and do something. Because like you say, a lot of the international organizations just sort of exist as a moral.
Yeah, well, they exist to really strongly encourage us to do the right thing.
To nanny you.
And that's basically what this is. Yeah. The ICJ is strongly encouraging that you do these things, but it's strongly encouraging it so you don't get prosecuted.
So is there would there be a statute of limitations on this? Because I could see if you're in an island that's losing territory, right, a coast that's losing territory, it's everyone that everybody that was heavily into the Industrial Revolution should compensate us. That would be I don't even know if I think they should win that lawsuit. I just think it's interesting. I just think
that's the thing. It gets hard. Yeah. Climate reparations are really hard. It's a similar conversation to reparations on other atrocities that have happened around the world. Right. And those can be traced to actual people. Climate change can't necessarily. Yeah. What I do worry about with the statute of limitation is that point about harm. If a project is carried out or an action is done and we find out later that it did harm, can you still prosecute that?
Yes, exactly.
How many years into the future can you prosecute it in hindsight, right?
Yeah. And we know that companies do it sometimes knowing the risks and knowing the downsides of it, and they still do it. And countries do it as well, right? They just don't care. Especially countries that are more tend more towards national control of things. So
but there's also the other side with countries that don't necessarily have, or organizations that don't necessarily have the research and the data.
Yeah.
Right. So you could literally just make a mistake, but does that absolve you from the mistake you've done?
I think part of the equation has to be capability to even do anything about it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If they don't have the resources to not contaminate, and they also don't have the resources to compensate you, then sorry, but you're sort of out of luck.
Yeah, and it's one of those. I can imagine some of these cases to start with might just be to set an example. Mm-hmm. I can imagine it'll be something that is used just to show, like, hey, even if this lawsuit isn't won, we were making an example out of this situation. You know, I think it's something Friends of the Earth and Client Earth are two really good organizations that I absolutely adore. And even if they don't win a case, they're raising awareness about there is this issue that has a legal basis to be fought on.
Yeah.
Right? Winning it is like the last stretch, but the whole process of battling it and creating the case and going to court and debating it, that whole process creates awareness around an issue.
Yep, buzz.
So winning it is just a cherry on top a lot of times. Especially in climate litigation, it can get murky quickly.
Yeah.
So maybe this is a new awareness raising moment.
Hopefully it's something. It's hopefully it is something. You know, it's not.
It's something, exactly. Hopefully. Well, any final remarks?
What a year it's been.
What a year. I'm so sorry, guys. We're a lot lower energy today. It's a news episode. The news are a bit crazy in climate and outside. We just hope everyone's well and taking care of yourselves. And our next episode is actually going to be really fun and really upbeat. So you are going to thank us for this chill one this week.
Yeah. And it was a chill episode. I think
it's a chill episode. We're just chatting. We're doing the proper podcast thing. Yes, this is what podcasters do. They just chat. They hit record and have a chat.
I'm going for more of this. Yeah, it's always...
Look at us. We're podcasters.
Baby. Oh my God. We did it.
Well, our next solo episode will be a deep dive. And if you have any ideas of things we should deep dive into, send it our way. Again, podcast@tangeliclife.org. Also on our webpage, you'll be able to find the resources from all these news, some of our comments and points that we've discussed today. Tangeliclife.org/Tangelic Talks. And we'll catch you guys on the next one.
Toodles.
Toodles.